And that obliviousness is problematic, right? And I think this happens for artists. I think like I find this a lot because I work mostly with screenwriters these days. But screenwriters, they run into these problems and it's like, well, you're breaking this rule. And they're like, oh, well, I thought I could. It's like, you don't understand the rule. You don't understand why it's there. You can break this rule. But if you go and you just break it because you're like trying to be different, and then you run into this problem, you didn't break it because you understood what you were doing. You broke it because you thought you were being unique and creative by breaking it. This is Way of the Artist with Brandon Colby Cook and Evan Schulte.
Exploring the challenges of the creative call
so that you can claim your own path
and make your life a work of art.
Welcome to another episode of the show, Way of the Artist. Okay, so I was at the grocery store. I was telling Evan this story earlier. And it was chaos, total disorder, really weird energy because people are walking around like, for lack of a better word, morons, just kind of like, oh, I think I'll go over there. Oh, I think, and not even looking where they're going to go. And then just stopping randomly as though everybody there was in their own little bubble and no one else existed. And there's these moments and you'd look around, well, at least I did. I'm not sure if anyone else was looking around. I'm sure there must have been other people like myself who are looking around at other people, kind of like looking at their response, being like, freaking move. Holy crap. Like, and just people just creating like chaos. So we're in the store and people are blocking lanes, like people are waiting. They're not paying attention to them. People are getting frustrated. They're getting so frustrated. They're trying to turn around. They're turning around into someone else. It's just like, and they can't leave. And then you can just see the energy it's just like vibrating, right? Then you get out, finally get your groceries. You get out to the parking lot. People are cutting through the parking lanes, turning around to go back to their car without even looking, nearly getting run over by a car, totally oblivious to the fact that even happened. And then people are like in a rush trying to swerve their car, nearly causing an accident because now they're doing something that's irregular and not normal. Anyway, so I had this experience. The reason why I'm starting off this way is because I want you to understand where this is coming from. I suggested on this episode that we take the lens of an artist who's often dealing with chaos and disorder, particularly with their emotions and these images or sounds or feelings or just whatever's happening. And you're trying to go, where do I put this? What do I do with this? Is there something here? I don't know. And what I thought would be interesting to explore is how, as an artist, you want to create enough order for your chaos to hit the page or hit the canvas or find its beat or rhythm or whatever medium you're using. And, for example, there are limitations in art. And I think a lot of artists, they hear limitations and they go, oh, I don't want to be limited. I want to be unlimited. No, you want to be limited. Because if the canvas never ends, where does the painting find its boundary? If the song goes on forever, when it gets watered down. The screenplay needs to end. You need a certain amount of pages and we're done. Also, just from a viewer or a listener point of view, you get tired after a while. It's like they need boundaries too. They need limitations. So I was thinking, Evan suggested something. I'm going to pass it to him in a second, but he talked about like a dam and like channeling this disorder into something. And I thought it would be an interesting thing to explore. So I'm starting from there. Evan, your thoughts?
Oh man, I've got many thoughts. I mean, for one, definitely can relate to just your very practical getting. I've been the same thing, man. Like the last number of days, just being out in the world and driving and whatever. I've just been like, what the is going on here? Like just, and oblivious is the word that you said to me. It's like, it's an obliviousness to it, which I think is part of what irritates me is just like, come on, like we're all people in this crazy thing together, and let's let's try and have some awareness and attention and consideration here for the fact that there's other people around. Like, just be aware of your surroundings and try and let's help each other out here. Like I love, I think it was Alan Watts who I heard this from, and he said like ethics is the art of how we live together. And it's just like, the more I think about it, it's like, yeah, like it's from the big things to the small things, where it's just like, hey, when you're in a shopping aisle at the grocery store and it's busy, hey, make sure that you're pull off to the side so people can pass you, right? That's a simple thing, and it helps us all to get along. We can agree to this as a nice little rule. It just helps each other get on with their day. No one wants to stay at the grocery store longer than they need to, right? Anyhow, that's all. So I sympathize, I empathize, all of those things. Going to the metaphor that you're talking about, yeah, as you were sort of explaining this thing of disorder and chaos, and I would just say also to anyone listening, we did a podcast a little while back, fairly recently. I think we called it like the relationship of feminine and masculine in creativity. I think that's kind of a nice partner pairing to where I think some of this conversation may be heading. But yeah, like there was this image of this dam that was just in my head, or just even a reservoir. Maybe it's not even dammed, but you have this big body of water, and it's this thing of just large potential. And it could be left untapped, or it could be tapped. It could be all kinds of things, right? But there's this thing, and it's just sitting there. I think that I just want to really explore this and discover this metaphor a bit more deeply. So I'm just talking out loud here, folks, thinking this through out loud. But that body of water, just as it is, it doesn't really present any kind of risk or anything, but it's just this thing that is there. And creativity is often kind of like that. There are these ideas, these inspirations, and they're just kind of maybe sitting there, right? And maybe you stumble upon this thing. Now, how you choose to let that kind of flow through, which is basically what art is like, okay, so there's this big thing. Now, how do you channel that thing down to the public? How do you channel that thing down for other people to see, right? That's what the different art forms basically are. They're different channels for that thing. Now, there are some people who just let it loose. Like, let's just fucking bring out the dynamite, just blow a big fucking hole in the side of this mountain and let it just come down. Well, that's going to be absolute disaster. Now that serene, gentle body of water is now this raging torrent down the mountainside. And what that's going to do to the environment, what that's going to do to the wildlife, what that could potentially do to towns and communities downstream of that thing, it's a disaster. It's an absolute disaster. So how you choose to funnel that potential, how you choose to funnel that water down, right, is part of what makes it something that is comprehensible, I guess. It's not necessarily just about completely controlling it, but it's about attentively directing it, right? It's about giving it somewhere to go in a way that its creative potential can actually be realized, I guess. So, you equate that sort of thing of like chaos and order. I almost feel like heading into like some sort of Jordan Peterson territory here. But these things are sides to the same coin, right? Like they have a relationship to each other, right? You don't have chaos without order, and vice versa, right? Like you only know them because one for what it is because its opposite exists. And I typically find that somewhere in the middle, there is where that thing is in harmony. There's where that thing is in balance. And art is very much like that, right? It's like, whoa, there's all of this potential. There's all of this creative potential that can be brought out pretty much at any time, in any way. It's truly an infinite space creativity. Like the only limit is the imagination, essentially, right? But you can't just fucking throw all of that shit at the wall. That's just taking out the dynamite and letting the water come cascading down. It's like, what am I even looking at? Right? And hey, there's something awe-striking about massive devastation. If you've ever seen like when a dam does legitimately break or there's a flood, but it's like something that we go, oof, like we don't want that to happen again. Right? We don't want to see that again. Right? So it's like there is a way in which we're sort of awestruck by it, but typically in the art world, it doesn't have the same weight as something in a natural capacity. We just go, what? That was shit. Like what was that? Right? Like there's nothing there for us to kind of grab onto. There's no way for us to go into it. I guess I know I'm talking a lot. I'll try and bring the metaphors together with the message here, I guess, and I'll pass it back to you. But it's like, let's say you decide to let that water flow down, and you create some sort of a creek bed for it to flow down through, right? Well, now there's a possibility for someone to be invited into that space, right? A person could go and sit by that creek. A person could go, and sit in the woods and be by that water, and not just people, but like other wildlife could be brought to that as well. Like there's just suddenly there's an invitation to that space, as opposed to letting the whole thing burst. And now it's like the only way you're participating in that is from a distance. Like you have to stand far away from that shit, right? Because there's no you participating in that really. There's no room for someone else to come in. And that's an essential part of art and creativity is that space for people to come in and participate in it. And if you're just letting the whole thing go, that for the most part goes away.
Yeah, there's a lot of things you said. So there's a few things I wanted to go into. I'm going to try to remember them all. One was people being in their bubble, and particularly I'll move this into the artistry realm about being in your bubble. But for example, like people in this grocery store situation, a lot of people just seemed like they only cared about themselves, and it was a disaster. It was like chaos, and it slowed everybody down. It slowed everything down. It created an energy. I noticed it wasn't like just me. I was like picking up on the energy because I could see that people were getting annoyed. They were getting frustrated. It's a nice, sunny, beautiful day. Like nobody needs to be upset here, but it's just because people aren't following the rules. They're thinking about themselves. So something that, the bubble, but something that came up for me through this was like, you know what? I actually like order. I always think of myself as somebody who's like, break the rules, like, be willing to be different. Like, don't just follow the rules mindlessly. But I think there's a certain amount of, when you get enough people in an environment, we need each other to follow the rules, whether we understand them or not. We need each other to follow the rules, because if you don't follow the rules and you think they don't apply to you, you might not understand why the rules are there. Here's an example. If you come up to a stop sign, or say a red light, actually a red light's a better example. You come up to a red light and there's no traffic around, and you can see clearly to the left, clearly to the right, clearly behind you, clearly ahead of you, and you're sitting at this red light and there's no one around. Should you cross the red light? Well, in my opinion, yes, you should, because The reason why the red light is there is to keep us safe. The red light is not there to get you to stop and follow a rule and and if you did go to court, let's just say there was a camera there and it took a snap of you as you went through the red light. You could argue and say, listen, it was this time of day. Why? And you could even ask the judge if you were up against the judge or you're up against whatever was enforcing this. And you could say, listen, why is the red light there? What's the ethic behind the rule? And you could argue. And I've done this with a speeding ticket because when I was younger, I got caught speeding at one point and I went to court and I argued with the police officer and I said, well, I'm not even arguing whether I was speeding or not. That's irrelevant. What I'm arguing is, should I speed to avoid an accident or is it better for me to take the accident and make sure I don't speed? And the police officers, well, it's better to speed to avoid an accident. And I said, listen, here's the situation. And what I was doing I felt was the safest way to drive. And I was being honest about it. I mean, you could be deceptive and do your thing. But the thing is, I argued the ethic and they said, okay, good. No ticket for you. And I walked out and everyone was like, whoa, holy shit. But the thing is
ovation in the courtroom.
Pretty much, it was pretty fucking awesome, I have to say. But the point is that it gave me a lot of faith in the legal system because I was there with people who are, I was a 20-year-old something, and I was with all these people who are like, this judge and the police officer is older than me and everybody there. And I'm this kid who argued an ethic. And I walked out like I was Good Will Hunting or something, like a good, Will Hunting, Good Will Hunting. And I just walked out like I solved some fucking big mystery. And it's like, the reason why I knew to do that was because I studied philosophy and I studied ethics and I studied how to think about things. So my point is that, let me bring this back. I didn't realize until today, it didn't hit me. And I'm like, wait a minute, I actually really like order. I like it. I want it in our society. I've been so defiant against it for so much of my life. And I've always been like, don't control me. Don't tell me what to do. But in truth, I follow the rules, but I like to follow them because I understand them. But I was also thinking about it today and I'm like, you know what? You don't even need to understand the rules. Let's just try to work together here. Because if you're clogging up everything for everybody, you're a pain in everyone's ass. And here's the question. Do you want to be a pain in everyone's ass? Because I felt like a lot of these people, it's not that they wanted to disrupt anybody else's day. I don't even think they knew they were doing it. And that obliviousness is problematic, right? And I think this happens for artists. I think I find this a lot because I work mostly with screenwriters these days. But screenwriters, they run into these problems. And it's like, well, you're breaking this rule. And they're like, oh, well, I thought I could. It's like, you don't understand the rule. You don't understand why it's there. You can break this rule. But if you go and you just break it because you're trying to be different, and then you run into this problem, you didn't break it because you understood what you were doing. You broke it because you thought you were being unique and creative by breaking it. My final point is this. If I can remember it. Oh, Evan, you said a lot. Okay. So you know what? I don't know if I do remember. Maybe it will come back. I'm trying. People, you can tell this is live because no one who planned this out would ever do this. Very, very chaos. Authentic, Yeah. Well, the point is that seeing that as an artist, seeing that order actually helps you, I think is really good for artists, because my personal opinion and experience of artists is the more artistic you are, the more chaotic you tend to be, the more disordered you are. And this is proven through psychology. You can look at somebody who's very artistic and creative. They tend to be a clutter bug. They tend to be very messy. There's not very much structure in their life. You'll see they have random shit over here. They have things clogged up. It just tends to be that way. It's not always the case, but it's very, very common. And what happens for a lot of artists is they get bogged down because they don't have order and they don't have systems and they don't have ways to structure and put stuff together. But somebody who's too structured and no chaos tends to be, they lack a lot of creative expression because everything has to be in its place. Tidy, 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 all the right things, all the right colors, all the right matching things. And creativity doesn't always work very well in that realm. And so much of this conversation for me, my final note is about balance. And when you're in your bubble as an artist and you're like, why am I blocked? Why are things not working? Maybe you're just too much in your bubble, and maybe you're too much in your chaos, and you just need to get a little organized, a little direction, a little order.
Yeah, I mean, that's like, we've also talked and had episodes where we've talked about, the value of limitations in creativity and how limitation is often the thing that breeds creativity. Right. But it can also, like, that's the thing, these things can all go too far in any direction, and it creates a problem, right? Too many limitations, nothing can happen, right? So there's always this play that goes back and forth, and just going, commenting on what you're saying with, about order and rules that we have in society, like, things is like traffic or whatever the hell it is. These are all, our laws are all, in a sense, they are collectively agreed upon limitations, right? These are all like, we say, it's like, hey, look, it's important that we have this limitation, that we set this limitation here for such and such reasons, right? And every now and then we change laws, right? Because they become no longer useful. They actually they become a hindrance to the system. And you say, hey, hang on a second. Why do we have this limitation? Why do we have this limit on this freedom? Is this still important for us to have this limitation? And, it sometimes takes a really long effing time, but like, we'll eventually come to a point where they'll go, yeah, okay, let's scrap this thing. We're getting rid of this and whatever, because this doesn't seem to make sense anymore. But other times there are reasons why we do put a limitation on things, because it's like, yeah, this is going to actually save people's lives. This is actually going to, and so there's always that thing that's at play, where it's like, you need both of these happening at the same time, right? That there needs to be order, but there also at the same time always needs to be something that's challenging that order. Mm-hmm. Right? There always needs to be something that's challenging that order, in order for it to remain healthy and harmonious, right? Where the thing that's constantly is like, is that really necessary? Right? And it's like, okay, yeah, maybe it is still necessary, but it's like, hey, it isn't.
Can I say something?
Yeah, get in there.
Okay, I want to real quick here. But yes, the too much order without being challenged, it's like it gets tightened and tightened and tightened. And the problem is, and I think that it's very healthy for all of us to find a certain amount of admittance to this, that we like control and we want to feel like we know what's going to happen, and it makes us feel safe. And the problem is when you get control freaks, right? We kind of call them control freaks. It's like you're too controlling. You're strangling the life out of this. And I think you made a really interesting point, and this is all I really wanted to comment on, was that unchallenged order becomes just more order. And then it creates no room for anything. And so I'll pass it back to you. And I think what we're kind of getting into here is we want order, but we also want room for play.
Yeah, and there's been plenty of dystopian stories that have been told about, like, what happens when there's just too much order and control over everything. For what I know that there's so many better stories than this, but the one that comes to mind is the movie Equilibrium. I don't know if you remember that one with Christian Bale. It was kind of like the gunplay kind of like action-y type of a thing, but it was interesting. It's like everyone had to wear the same thing, like art wasn't allowed. Like, people weren't allowed to have art in anywhere. That was like illegal and whatever, and everyone was drugged up all the time. It was kind of, this, it was almost like Matrix before the Matrix in a way. Cause I think it did come out before the Matrix came out. A very different kind of a story, but like some similar ideas there. But anyhow, I feel like there was something else that I wanted to touch on in there as well. Yeah, just like limitations, our freedoms, that play that we have in between them. There was something, but now I do that, Brandon. So
maybe we can get into play in the order, like creating like order, but where's the room within the order?
well, I mean, yeah, there's always room, and that's, I think, where the challenging kind of thing comes in. Like that, it's that necessary element of unpredictability in art, right? It is absolutely necessary, because that's like the thing that has to enter into the equation. So like in the movies, for example, right? Like there's got to be something that you're doing within whatever your story is, whatever your movie is, whatever genre it is that you're in, right? There are things that you have to do that challenge the way that it's been done, right? And that's where, and you've brought this up, and this isn't like a to toot my own horn thing, and I feel like it was something that came across my way somehow, somewhere that I can't recall. But basically it was like, look at everything that you've written, right? Like if you're writing something, and like, and find everything that you've done that is contrived, that has been done before, that is token, that is whatever it is. Find those things and reshape that, right? You got to find those moments and redo it. And I think that's those things where that's where the challenge is, right? That's where you're coming in to challenge some of these conventions, right? Because like any writer would know at the end of this, your first draft of a script is probably not going to be good. Even if you're a good writer, it's probably not going to be good, right? It's going to need to be rewritten and then probably rewritten again. But that first time through, you're often going to see all of those little things that are like, oh yeah, this is from something that I've seen before, right? This is like a scene from another movie, and there was something about that scene that I liked, right? Like that's the thing. They're not just like, oh, they're just complete shit. There's something there, right? There's a reason why it found its way in there, right? Because there was some kind of thing about it that you really liked, right? But it's like, okay, great. Take the inspiration from that thing, but you can't do it the same way, right? So now how are you going to do this, right? How are you going to pull this off? Where can you find your voice in this thing, right? What is something that you would think would be really interesting to see, or something that fires you up in a way to do it a bit differently, right? And that's that challenge to the thing, right? That's where that challenge comes in, is just an example like that. And the thing that I was thinking about that just came back, I remembered, was from another book, and I wish I could remember the name of it. I read it as a teenager, and it kind of like, it had some real gems in it. I would love to reread it if I could think of it. But at the start of the book, the author had this statement that said, every rule can be challenged except for this one. Yeah. That's so great. Like, that's so fantastic. Like, it's just a thing of like, yeah, like challenge every rule can be challenged, and probably should at some point be challenged, right? That doesn't mean that it necessarily goes away, but you need to keep that shit in check, right? And through those challenges, you might find some kind of opportunity. You might find some kind of potential that hasn't been tapped before.
Yeah, going to the screenwriting example you're talking about, the first script you write probably won't be good. I was thinking about that, just kind of spurred on a thought while you were furthering yours. And it's like, it brings me back to this other thing of like good compared to what? Like, which is something that I think where a lot of artists struggle with, where it's like, for example, I was doing a coaching for an actress who's up for a pretty big role in a movie, and she knocked it out of the park, in my opinion, with the taping and everything. And the last time we worked together, she booked a big role, and she's like, "Was it good? Was it good?" I'm like, "Compared to what? Like what are we talking here? Like you want me to tell you it's good? I can see that, but it's like compared to what? Are you like?" The thing is that if you look at what you did it do what it needs to do? And the thing is, I think a lot of people get very confused about this, particularly artists, okay? They get very confused. Like, think about it this way. As an audience member, when I turn on Netflix and I say, "Oh, I'll watch this movie today," like, there might be a part of me of like, "Oh, that acting really sucks," But that's only because it actually sucks. It's like not real. It's like inauthentic. It's faked. It's bullshit. Like, so that's a different thing we're talking about. So are you asking me, did I feel like you faked it? No, I don't. Okay, so now we're into the next category. Are you Meryl Streep? Now you're trying to, what do you want me to do here? The writing isn't what Meryl Streep would normally do. How do I even compare you to that? Could Meryl Streep do any better with this writing than you? I don't know. I don't know. I'd be interested to see what Meryl Streep would do with this. It'd be interesting, right? Wouldn't that interest us all? The thing is like we get down these fucking rabbit holes of like what is good. And one of our teachers back in the day, Evan, I always try to go back to this one because I didn't realize how accurate a statement it was until later on in my career. But he said, Nathaniel DeVoe, he said, "There are no better actors, there are only more truthful actors." And I personally think that once you get to a certain level of truth, it doesn't really matter. And it's just different flavors at that point. It's just different flavors of purity and honesty. And, and then she's going to ask me, "Well, was I good?" Well, is your version of it good, better compared to someone else? Like, I don't know, man. It's chocolate and strawberry. Like, they're different. And sometimes I want strawberry and sometimes I want chocolate. Like, it doesn't matter, Yeah. And so and I'm like, I would not be surprised if you booked this role. But the thing is also like, I don't know. Do they want strawberry today? Do they want chocolate today? Like, you got to let that shit go at that point, right? Yeah. And the other thing too is like, I guess I'll say one last thing about this topic. Because I did start on writing, but I kind of went into this acting story. But it's all the same shit. I mean, at the end of the day, you want to look at it in terms of what are you trying to deliver on? So let me give you a more like for those of you out there who are artists and you're like, "Well, I'm an artist." Like what? Look, if I got a clogged toilet, okay? I got a clogged toilet. I need to get it fixed. And I have a plunger and the plunger unclogs my toilet, I'm pretty fucking happy with that plunger. Do I need to go like, "Well, there's a better plunger out there in the world that could," who gives a shit? You like how I use that one? Who gives a shit? It doesn't matter. It's like, it unclogged my toilet. That's the only thing I care about. Audiences, when they're watching a movie, they're not much different. They're like, did this put me on the edge of my seat? Did I know and could I predict what was going to happen? Was I surprised? Was it predictable? These are the questions we're asking. But we're not necessarily going off and thinking like, "Hey, like, is this good or whatever?" It's just, did it do what I needed it to do? Did it put me on edge? Was it mysterious? Was it, whatever it needed to be? So anyway, let's wrap this one up, Evan. What's your thoughts?
Okay. All right. Yeah, I was just, first thing I was going to say was I would love to see some sort of like project, something called Meryl Streep Does Complete Dog Shit, where it's like, yeah, like just she takes like scenes from stuff that's actually been made, like that's just terrible. And then like she does her thing with them and see what Meryl Streep could do. I think that'd be fascinating. I think it'd be hilarious and great. I was also just going to add one thing to it as well. was because this was something that came to my mind before too, and it's like another acting story. And I've told this one. I don't know if I've shared this on the podcast before, and I'll try and give the quick version of it. But I remember sitting in, waiting to go in for an audition this one afternoon. Right, I'm sitting there going over my scene, and there's these two guys in the room who knew each other from class or whatever, and they were chatting with each other and whatever. It was the day after the Oscars, and Daniel Day-Lewis had won Best Actor for There Will Be Blood. And so the one guy mentions like, oh yeah, Daniel Day, man, wins another Oscar. And this guy just goes, ah. And he was like, oh, you, like, the guy was kind of puzzled. Like, he's like, you weren't a fan? He was just like, I thought his performance was sloppy, and I was just like sitting there just being like, sloppy, fucking sloppy. Like, and to me, and this is just my opinion. This person is allowed to have their opinion, but my opinion is that is one of the great screen performances of all time. It's my own personal favorite. I just go, holy shit. Like that is on a whole other level. That is like transcendent. And there was a part of me that was like, what was he talking about? Right? Like, what was he saying? And I have a couple of sort of ideas on that, which is like, there's sometimes people like to just like shit on something that people think is amazing because it elevates their status in the eyes to do that. I think there's a little bit of that going on there. But in terms of this conversation of order and everything, I thought, well, what's the opposite of sloppy, right? Well, very clean, very ordered, very all of this stuff. So then I thought, well, maybe he thought he didn't play his beats hard enough. And it's like, so here's an actor who's sitting there, who's trained, and who knows a lot, who's had some training, but he likes his beats nice and clean in a scene. He likes to see that shift. And I'm like, if that's what you're looking for as an actor to be what great acting is, which for me, that has nothing to fucking do with it. But if that's what you're looking for, if you're looking to see that technical thing in the work, then yeah, he probably would have hated that performance because he was a wild animal in that thing, right? Like he's kind of shifty and he's looking around, he's moving. You just don't know what he's doing at any moment when something might just come out of his mouth. Like there's something very off kilter about the whole thing, which is to me part of the brilliance of it. But anyhow, that's this whole thing of like just one last sort of personal thing that I want to interject with this like order and disorder kind of a balance, right? But anyhow, beer. We're drinking a beer right now, and I brought this one in today, and this is from Nelson Brewing. Beautiful, beautiful town, Nelson, British Columbia. And this is their Pop Top Hazy Citrus Pale Ale. And I've been really enjoying it. It's summer, sun. It's all of those things in a can. And I don't know what else to say about it than that.
Well, I was reading the can, Evan, and it says notes of citrus and a hint of Himalayan sea salt. It's a really good beer, man. I've really enjoyed it. And when I first had it, I was like, oh, this kind of feels like it's like slightly infused with grapefruit. I don't know if that's the case or not, but I like it a lot. It's been really nice. Very summery. Okay, here's my final thoughts. It's not an ad, by the way. It's tradition. We have a beer, we talk shop, we talk art. Okay, well, this has been interesting because, yeah, like, I think I think a lot of our talks are like this because this is not unlike feminine and masculine energy talk. It's not a little bit about like the mess and the math talk. It's we touch on this topic in various forms many different times. But I think it's a way for an artist to kind of like a lens to put your work through, a lens to put your craft or your approach through and be like, am I overly ordered here or overly messy, And like the thing is like, I agree with you on the Daniel Day-Lewis. I guess this is how I'll finish it off. He said sloppy. I wouldn't use that word. I'd say, sure, I could go with maybe it was a little messy, but messy not in a way that is bad, in a way that actually like, is good, in a way that I want it to be kind of messy. And that kind of unpredictability. Like, I'm not sure if this was said or he noted on this, but someone pointed out at some point this came across, but there was like this talk about him almost like being kind of like a wolf and like almost like the big bad wolf. And I was like, yeah, man, this is like I've never seen, like, he's a very angular kind of looking guy anyway, but I've never seen him look so angular. And just like the way he would look at people, and it's just like, I'm going to consume you. Like I am like fearless. And even if I am scared, I'm never backing down. And it's like, here you can see the fangs just being shown under the lip a little bit, this type of thing. But not because it's an actor going, I know it'll be interesting if I do this. It's just like, no, that's just how that came alive for you. And it really, truly seems like a wild fucking animal. And if you were face to face with a wolf that was like maybe a little bit hungry, maybe a little bit in protective mode, and not so friendly, you might kind of be like, what the fuck is this thing going to do? And how much danger am I in? And that's the thing I'd say was a little messy about it in a good way, is that how much danger is everyone in with this guy roaming around this little town, And the more power he gets, the more it's like, ooh, this guy this is in his interesting journey. But I mean, without that performance, I mean, where is that journey? So, yeah, you look at that movie, it's very ordered. It's very structured. It's very, very well put together. It's got a great arc. It has everything that you really need. But is it cookie cutter? Is it traditional? Does it hit its beats? I don't know. Does it matter? I guess that's my question.
Yeah, I think my final thought on this is, almost like just think about or go and revisit some piece of art, whether it's a film or a book or an album or something. Go and revisit that thing, like and take something that you really love and really like, and look at it through that lens, that this is a harmony of order and disorder, and see how that's at play here. And I mean, like, because every piece of art is exactly that thing in terms of that coming back to that water and that channel kind of a thing. There Will Be Blood, that movie was how something decided to be challenged. So we were like, okay, we're going to make this thing into a movie, and it's going to have these people, like, we're imposing all these limitations. Like, well, we're not having Daniel Day-Lewis and Peter Skarsgård playing this. So we're going to have certain limitations on what we're doing here. We're not going to have fucking Iron Man flying in at some point in this movie, because that like now we're going, hey, right? Like, it's too much disorder. This doesn't make any sense anymore, right? Like, you can't just throw all the shit. Just like, yeah, but people really like Iron Man. Like, Iron Man's are like, it's like, yeah, but he doesn't belong in this movie, right? Like, it's a hysterical, I do that for just to make the point, right? That it's like, but it's still kind of like that, right? You can't just throw everything into it, right? Because that's the allowing the full flow to come through. It's like, no, because that's stupid, right? Sometimes creativity is about what you don't do, what you don't show, the notes that you don't play as much as the notes that you do play, right? And learning that kind of restraint is a huge part for any artist to do, not just in their work, but for us to learn in life as well.
Thank you for listening in on our conversation today. We hope you found something helpful that you can carry forward with you. Head over to our website, wayoftheartist.com, for more free exclusive material and learn about the show. If you haven't already, please support us by subscribing to the show, sharing it with people you know, and keeping compassionate, creative conversation going.